All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order tonight, and it's February 9th if you're watching on TV, and we have a number of interesting items on our agenda tonight, but the first item I'm going to turn over to Superintendent Metz for our spotlight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask the cabinet members to come up and help me with this spotlight. Tonight's spotlight is actually spotlighting the school board because next week is School Board Recognition Week. And it's a time for us to stop and thank our fabulous school board members here in St. Louis Park. I'm going to say a little bit about the board, and then we're going to award them with a very prestigious certificate here, thanking you for your service to this community. For those who don't know, the school board really is a very devoted and committed group. They devote all kinds of time, both at meetings, scheduled meetings. I was telling some of the audience members we had 2 meetings before this meeting tonight. So lots of meetings that people don't see, lots of listening sessions. And more important than anything else, they're the eyes and ears of the community, and wherever they go in the community, people come and talk to them and give them ideas and suggestions and supportive comments in regard to the school district. So it's a 24/7 job, and they do it seeking no personal fanfare and out of the goodness of their heart. So this is a time for us to thank them. They work on the policies, the big policies of the district that guide the work of the district. As I said, attend many meetings. And for me personally, giving me lots of good, wise counsel as superintendent, which I appreciate. There's lots of history on this board. They remember lots of things from many years ago. And there's a good combination of that history and new ideas. It's really a tremendous school board. When I talk to other superintendents, I realize how fortunate we are in St. Louis Park to have this board. So we have some students here who wanted to say thank you. And when I call your name, I'd like you to come up and hand you this certificate and thank you for your good work. First of all, board member Bruce Richardson. Ken Morrison. Nancy Gores is not here tonight. She was our outgoing board chair, was a very, very successful board chair. We want to congratulate Nancy when she gets back. Jim Yarosh. Karen Waters. Joe Tatalovich. And Julie Schweitzer. So once again, board members and community members, let's take next week to thank these board members for their dedication to this community and to the children of St. Louis Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and on behalf of all of the board, and thank you to all of the students who signed those large posters, and teachers and whoever corralled them to get them to sign. Looking up close, there's a lot of names on there. That is a very nice twist on the many certificates we have, but you don't get very many posters like that with the student signatures. That was a very nice touch. Thank you very much to everybody involved. With that, I have called the meeting to the order, but I'm going to go through the agenda. The first item is the approval of the agenda, followed by the superintendent's report. Then we have numerous discussion items. They include the Financial Advisory Committee update, all-day kindergarten update, high school annual report to the school board, the 2015-16 budget amendments, WEMEP resolution, and the strategic plan kickoff. Then on our action agenda, we have approval of the 2015 budget amendments and approval of the WEMEP resolution, followed by communications and transmittals, and last but not least, adjournment. So is there a motion to approve that agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Bruce, seconded by Jim. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And first item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
I have two quick items for my report tonight. First of all, I'd like to recognize Health in the Park, a community-wide group that's working to promote health in St. Louis Park. And this last Sunday, yesterday, they had an event at the middle school. The speaker was Ken Barlow, meteorologist for Channel 5 television, speaking about mental health and specifically bipolar. He has bipolar mental health issues, and he did a fabulous job. It was a huge crowd. I heard 300 to 400 people there. I was there. I didn't count, but it was a big crowd. People filled the parking lot and all the way out on the street. He spoke for about 45 minutes, and then the group organized into small circles, and individual community members spoke with professionals and just helpers in the community about mental health issues. And then there was really a health fair there where there were tables and booths set up with resources from all across St. Louis Park for families that were interested in getting more information about mental health. His talk was excellent. He did a very, very good job, and it was a good event. I'd also like to celebrate on a happy note that some of our construction projects are actually making progress, and Aquila is ready to move. So this next weekend, on President's Day actually, we don't have school a week from today on President's Day, but that's going to be moving day, where furniture and supplies are going to be moved from one end of the room into the brand new classrooms. So we're 1 week away from moving day at Aquila. So the next time this school board meets, the Aquila students should be settled into their new classrooms. So that'll be one of the projects completed, so that's something to celebrate.
Okay, that is good news, and hopefully the others follow it before too long. First on the discussion items is the Financial Advisory Committee update, and Sandy Celine is going to present. I do see other members of that committee there. Superintendent Metz, do you have anything to introduce it? Or?
Just like to introduce Sandy Celine. She's the Director of Business Services here at the school district, does a very good job. She facilitates the Financial Advisory Committee. The committee met 6 times this year, and they're ready to provide recommendations tonight to the superintendent.
And if I may add, just as a background of this committee, it was started a few years back to give us, like the superintendent said, to give the superintendent recommendations on the budget assumptions. And we've had a lot of great conversations with a lot of knowledgeable individuals who know their finance and know their business world, and have come up with a great recommendation for the superintendent. So with that, I'm going to let David Larson, who was one of our representatives of the committee, who has chosen and has been chosen, I guess, to do the presentation for us tonight. And with that, I'm going to give it to David Larson.
Thank you. All right, I think our first slide, talking about the agenda for tonight, and maybe even before that, I want to thank whoever it was it you, Sandy, that put me on the committee, because it was fun. It was enjoyable chatting with everybody and seeing some of the numbers behind what was going on. So it doesn't seem like such smoke and mirrors when I got all done looking at it. So, which is good. For the agenda, we're going to be going through. We'll briefly touch on who the members were, some of our goals, and the things that we considered. Drivers of enrollment. And then talk a little bit about the general fund, its purpose, the current balance and comparison with other districts, some current economic considerations, and then we'll lay out some recommendations that we have for Rob and the board to ponder for next year. So our committee members, we had Amy Burns and Julia Fredrickson, Steve Ganalski, myself, Catherine, Bruce, and Joe. So a couple board members and a few folks from outside was a pretty good mix. Everybody seemed to participate and have opinions, and that was great. Really, our goal is to try and help Sandy and Rob in creating some reasonable financial forecasts. Most of, we did look at, as you can kind of see the list here, past performance, the prior year audit, revenues and expenses, and looked at state funding, what it's historically been, what we think it might be based on certain factors, how the formula allowances work, student enrollment, and then a lot of that information was taken and could be plugged in by Sandy into a forecast model she has, which also helps then drive what the general fund balance is. We did, for what it's worth, we didn't spend a lot of time on some of the granular expenses in there. It was probably more driven around revenues and numbers of students and WADMs than it was some of the expense side. So, right. Enrollment and income drivers. The biggest source of income is going to be a payment from the state of Minnesota that's based on what's called a WADM, or a weighted average daily membership, which basically is the number of students you got in the chair times a factor. Historically, you had lower factors for kindergarten and different for K to 3 and 3 to 6 and 7 to 12. Last year it was simplified. Basically it was 1.0 for K through 6 and 7 through 12. It was a 1.2 calculation. So you can kind of take the number of kids that you got in the seat and roughly multiply times 1.1 given the average across the board and come up with the number of WADMs that you're then going to get paid for. And so each one of those WADMs is going to be paid X number of dollars. And so part of what we were trying to do here too then was assess how much is, not only how many WADMs are we going to have, but what percent increase can we expect in some of the state funding. One of the points that we wanted to make here, we do have to accept all students who reside in St. Louis Park boundaries. So if they show up at the door, we got to find a chair for them. That said, the district has enjoyed really steady growth in enrollment, and a great part of that is the number of core students from St. Louis Park that we are filling in with as I note here, we do have some capacity strains that we're facing right now, but the good thing is the factory, if you would, is basically full. And what Rob is able to successfully do is look at the number of core St. Louis Park students we have and then turn around and use open enrollment to get these factories, if you would, up to full capacity, which means they're going to be efficient, we're going to be generating as much revenue as we can, and so it's going to create opportunities kind of across the board. As an example, our WADMs from 11 to 12 rose by 26, from year-end 12 to 13 they rose by 75, and in 13 to 14 they rose by 90. 14 to 15 it looks like we're up about 42 seats right now. We don't know how that's going to convert into WADMs by year end, but while we have seen the growth, we are now basically at or very close to total capacity in the buildings. As I point out here, even the newly built classrooms will be full next year as students are placed in proper classrooms instead of on a stage or in a temporary space like media centers and things like that. But that's a good thing. Really, again, the point here, open enrollment has allowed us to maximize the use of the facilities by turning on or turning off the open enrollment. And so right now it's 85, 87, 88%, somewhere in there, of the students are actually from St. Louis Park. The balance are coming out of open enrollment from various districts. Minneapolis probably the largest of all. On the next slide here, the one thing that has helped, I think in the past, we would keep open enrollment open longer, and so people would come in, but then it seemed like those folks tended to walk out the door a little bit faster. And so our numbers that we were anticipating or trying to project ongoing were less stable when you looked at how many of them hung around versus today. So by closing enrollment before the school starts, that seems to have helped the runoff that we have later on. And the chart that I attached here kind of shows, from the top graph is, now this would not include SPED and tuition students, but you can see just the sheer numbers of seats that start out here in the September-October frame has consistently gone up from 4,200 roughly at fiscal 08 to 46, it's like 4,640 or something like that here that started out this 14-15 year. And actually the numbers then, the fall off, as you can see, has been less in the current years than in prior years. Again, we think in part because closing the enrollment before school starts helped to eliminate some of that runoff. When we took these numbers then and converted it into this, along with tuition students, along with the SPED students, and converted into WADMs, where we were sitting at the end of fiscal 14, was 5,044 WADMs. This year, so far, we're up about 42 students this year, so we should be, by the end of this year, probably around 5,080 WADMs. And what we're projecting then, Rob thinks he can get a few more kids in the door and shoehorn them in here. So what we're recommending is that we use 5,100 WADMs for the fiscal 16 budgets. Okay. Excuse me. Need for general fund unreserved. Again, what this is money that's set aside to pay unforeseen expenses that may arise. And an example of that may be if we have a student that, a special ed student that comes in, or a few of them, typically we're only getting about 2/3 of the cost back in the first. So if we spend $2 million or $3 million, we're getting 2 back. So if a student or two comes in that has high needs, we're going to have to write a check. So that would be part of where that money is sitting aside. It's used to pay for items before revenue is collected. I mean, our revenue and expenses can be a little bit lumpy at times. So to have dollars in the checkbook, to be able to write checks now and collect the revenue later is important. The auditors want to see an amount set aside in case there is a deficit, so that we've got somewhere to fund that deficit from. We also, it's designed to help avoid having to borrow, and it does help with our bond rating, and we do have bonds outstanding. I think last year Julie had pointed out we saved like $800,000 in interest expense because our bond rating went up, which is great. We are heavily reliant on the general ed formula allowance, and it does provide an amount of financial flexibility. At the end of the year, there was about $7.6 million of unreserved dollars, which is roughly, if you put it sort of into days, it's about 50 days worth of cash sitting on the side. So, it's a good amount. Not fat and sassy, but it's looking pretty good. All right. So then what we did, we took a look at kind of the general education revenue increases that we might see coming up. Now, I've got the word projected in there. It should have said proposed. There's a 1% proposed increase right now in the basic formula for fiscal year 16 and 17 that has initially been proposed by Governor Dayton in his 2015 education bill. And that came from, Bruce shared a memorandum from the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. So that's a starting point for negotiations with the legislature. That might go up as they choose to give away something here and add something there. We don't know where it's going to come in. Right now, that's at least the stake in the sand that he's placed. You can look down at the chart and see the last 2 years the increase was 1.5%. The 2 years before that it was 1%. The 2 years before that it was 0%. So it's, that's kind of gives you a history of sort of where the state has come in some of their historical funding, and at least the point in the sand that they're going to start with for the next 2 fiscal years. The next slide, we tried to lay out here where our budget, or excuse me, where our fund balance stands relative to other districts. And the right side of this, it's all western districts, Edina, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and so on. Our unassigned fund is at 14.6%, which is probably towards the top end of what some of these districts are, although we'll get into where some of that might be able to be used here shortly, which would cut that down to more like 12.8%. And the left screen shows these balances relative to others in north suburban districts. My understanding is that Spring Lake Park is actually a pretty good comparison to us in terms of demographics and size and things like that. Now, they're sitting with, the highest of all fund balances, so I'm not necessarily saying that they're, what we should try and target. But if you look at these other districts out in the western suburbs, it looks like around 10 to 12, 13%, somewhere in there is probably at least where we should be sitting. Okay. Talking a little bit about some of the economic considerations that we took into account. The state of Minnesota is currently projecting a budget forecast of $1 billion, although that's before it takes into account inflation. So it sounds like that may eat up $600-700 million of it. Overall, the economy is improving at a modest to solid rate. Again, the initial budget that was proposed by Governor Dayton would suggest that some of these surpluses are likely to be used toward funding of other priorities rather than throwing a lot of dollars into the K-12 programs. I think, roads are something that are high on everybody's list. So I think that's maybe where he came out with his initial 1% suggested increase. And so really our conclusion here then too is, as we're putting together budgets, really, given the uncertainty of some of the future funding, we just need to continue to balance expenses and class sizes and programs while trying to retain a sufficient fund balance in case we do have unforeseen events that arise. All right. So our recommendations. Talked a little before about some of the numbers and the WADMs that we were suggesting. At the end of last year, there were 5,044 WADMs. We know we've added about 40-some students this year compared to last, which should bring us up around 50, 80. Rob thinks he's thinking he can get as many as 50 more in the door. We laid in here another 20. So we're at 5,100 WADMs is what we are suggesting be used. We're also suggesting the special education revenue remain the same. In that case, again, actually, if you see that rise, that isn't necessarily a good thing because you're only getting about 2/3 of it back. So if that's going up, you've got expenses on the other side out the door. There's nothing that would indicate it is going up or down, so we suggested to leave it flat. And then we are looking at, in spite of the 1%, that's sort of the initial line in the sand that the governor's drawn, that we use a 1.5% increase for the general education basic formula. I think if it turns out that it's only 1%, it equates to about $135,000. So it won't be a huge miss, if you would, and I think we are, if Rob can actually get a few more bodies than we've projected in the door, that'll make up the difference in that 0.5%. So we're suggesting build the model around 5,100 WADMs with a 1.5% increase, and special revenue or special education revenue remaining flat. Excuse me. The one thing that we did want to point out, there is currently a severance reserve that is in the general fund. Its total is $1,061,000. I rounded to $1,001,000. If you look at what Sandy has calculated as the potential liability, it's around $2.9 million. And so our suggestion would be that some of the dollars be moved from the unreserved fund into this reserve fund in an amount equal to about 2/3 of the obligation. And then ongoing, there are some additional accruals that are being made each year to cover some of those costs that do arise over time. So at least from that perspective, we'd have about 2/3 of it set aside. I think 600,000 is what you're expensing each year to cover claims that are coming through under that. And that would drop then the general fund down, or the unreserved fund down from about 7.7 to about 6.8 or so. More in line with kind of that 12.8% then, and actually lines back up with some of the other western districts and the size of their fund balances, their unreserved balances. We did want to point out, in terms of, we know that at some point your salary negotiations are going to be coming up, and they are going to have a significant impact on the fund balances. And I guess what we're suggesting is that we should be cautious about offering raises that are going to exceed what ultimately the state decides it's going to increase its funding by as a percentage. In the past 2 years, we increased salaries by 3.5% per year. And the way that was really funded, I mean, if you look, like last year, we increased the number of students by 90 Wadhams. Well, that's over $1 million worth of funding. If we only add in another $400,000 or so of incremental costs for the teachers, that left almost $700,000 that then was used for teacher increases. So, because if we only got 1.5 points on our increase on the Wadhams, that's where we picked up another, over 1.5 points. So really, over the last 2 years, all of the increases in funding that we have gotten have been directed to the teachers' salaries. It hasn't necessarily been available for other improvements or curriculum or anything like that. So that would be our caution to Rob and the board as they're negotiating that. The other thing we wanted to point out, again, we recognize that there are facility constraints that are going to limit the growth of Wadhams going forward. And we are suggesting that, I know there's a strategic planning committee that's going to be sitting down and talking. This would be a great item to talk about, because even as you're looking at where some of the numbers are in the various grades, it's clear once you hit middle school, it's kind of like, I'll use the factory analogy here again. You're creating all these widgets on this side, but once it hits the paint line in the middle, there's only so many that can go through, right? And so, how to use those facilities if we've got some increases, particularly in our own enrollment, we're going to have to talk about that. We've got the light rail that's coming through. We don't know if some of the housing that's going to be put in is going to attract people with children or not. If it does, we might move from 85% capacity being filled with our own students to suddenly we're short. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We got another building sitting on the side that could potentially be opened up and provide some relief, but it's something to think about. So from that perspective, we've kind of reached nirvana, right? I mean, we've got the building's full, and as the you're laughing, but anyhow, as the buildings are full, we're able to really ensure they remain full and fully utilized using open enrollment. But what it does also mean is that there's going to be limited ability to add incremental revenue over and above whatever we're getting from increases in the state, if it's 1, 1.5, 2. So, the other point that we wanted to suggest was that, that there be a really robust projection model that's created more or less even by school to really understand how are the dollars being spent. Because at the end of the day, if he wants to try something and he wants to find some money, he's not going to be able to say, well, I can add bodies and create the revenue to try something out. He's going to have to say, I'm going to take money from here and I'm going to put it over there. And so I think from his perspective, if he needs a really good tool to do that. And maybe some of those tools are there. I don't know. We weren't necessarily privy on this round to to that. But I will say next year, if I don't know whoever is on the committee, there won't be a lot of discussion around what's the increase going to be, because it will be known. And there won't be a lot of discussion around how many bodies are we going to get in here, because we're full. So maybe part of the focus of the committee next time can turn more towards some of the expenses and helping understand some of those. So that's our report, and we're sticking with it. All right.
Before the board asks questions, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, the other committee members, some of whom are here tonight. The Financial Advisory Committee is very, very helpful to me, and I appreciate attending the meetings. The conversations are enlightening. I think it's helpful for both the school district representatives, myself and the board members, and the community members to really take a good look at the finances of the district and have that give and take and back and forth discussion and come out of it with some good recommendations from the committee to myself as superintendent. I'll be taking this information and coming back to the board at our next meeting in 2 weeks and sharing my recommendations to the school board. And a lot of what I'm going to be using is coming from your work. So thank you for the time, committee members, that you've devoted. It's very much appreciated.
So board members, if you have questions, remember the actual budget amendments come up on our agenda a couple items down, so you can grill the administrators then. But are there any questions? No. Other than from the two of you who sat on the committee.
I just had
Oh,
one.
you got one? Ken?
Sure. I know you had alluded to you didn't have to look at cuts this year. Next year they'll look at maybe cutting out some of the fat. Did you venture into that at all, or were you just looking at, we're looking fine, let's just go ahead?
We were really tasked this year just on the revenue side in terms of what the increase would be in the numbers. We touched the expenses a little bit, but in terms of having access to anything with a lot of granularity and how it's being spent, we didn't see any of that.
Anybody else? Bruce? Okay.
I just want to add, Julia Frederickson is here tonight, and she has served on the committee for a number of years now. Is it 3, Julia? 4 or 5? Time flies when you're having fun. And Amy Burns is also here, and Amy has served with us for 2 years, Amy? Or was this was the first year. I just want to say, and I hope we didn't lose our audience here, because you start talking school finances, it's complex, it's a pain, but there are people who come to us, and David, he drew the short straw, so he presented tonight. But when you see the people who are newly arrived on the committee and the work that they do to get up the curve to understand this financing, I'm very grateful for their participation. And I want to mention Steve Gadnowski and Catherine Lawler, who are also on the committee. This year, 3 new members were all bankers or came from banks, and that's powerful because we've got a whole bunch of finance people, a whole bunch of bankers, and an engineer on the committee. Joe's our engineer, and it really is an excellent group who takes their time to understand this incredibly complex thing. And I want to add one more thing. David mentioned that we could open a school. We have a school building we could open. That would add 500 potential elementary students to our population. The issue would be when they hit the junior high, we can't fit them in. And then when they hit the high school, we can't fit them in. So that's where our strategic planning committee needs to take a hard look at what we can do here. If the governor does what he says he's going to do, and he does, in fact, add something for our facilities, the flexibility we can have in adding facilities, this could really be powerful for us, because if we get that flexibility and we can add to our junior high and high school, because we have the students who are arriving, and we don't need to pinch off our growth. We can, in fact, keep doing it, and we'll hear from the high school tonight about the great work they're doing. So, again, thank you to the committee members for all you do. And thank you for presenting, Dave.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. It's been said twice, but we can't say it enough. Thank you to all the committee members for participating. I've found the advice of this committee to be very valuable in the 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been, Julia, that it's existed. And that's been greatly appreciated. It's quite a few meetings, and we appreciate the extra time and energy you put into it. It does help us. So thank you very much. We're going to move on, or as I said earlier, we'll have the budget amendments later and the strategic plan update on that. But right now, the next item is the all-day kindergarten update, and that's going to be presented by Carrie Ross, our Director of Teaching and Learning. And I will turn it over to Carrie.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I know it's really hard to follow finance, but we are going to do our best.
It's hard to follow budget nirvana.
Oh,
he said.
budget nirvana. Those are two words I never thought I would say together. We're going to work on our technical difficulties here. Maybe Mr. Marble can help us. Looks like we're on Elmo instead of Lou. Yes, I might need help. Oh, no, never mind. Tom's been teaching me how to fish. So we are here to talk about all-day kindergarten with an update. You might recognize Kelly Etienne. Kelly, you might recognize her from Susan Lindgren or the many other hats that she has worn in our school district over the course of time. Right now, she is dividing her duties between Susan Lindgren and serving as our kindergarten coach. So we have been tasked this year to combine 3 kindergarten programs in 4 different schools, and we know through implementation that the 2 biggest obstacles to doing a full implementation is time and money. And there's only so much time in the school day, only so much time that a teacher can do by themselves. So having a coach that works alongside our kindergarten teachers this year kind of helps mitigate that time. So Kelly does a wide variety of things. She's going to tell you more about what she does throughout our presentation. We've added a few more slides than you have in your board packet, but I think you'll be happy to see them. They're all pictures of kids in our kindergarten program. So we'll just start with giving you just a snapshot about our all-day program. This is the first year that we've had all day, every day for all kids. It is a very busy day. We do reading and writing and math and Phi-Ed every day, along with science and social studies and art and other things. And throughout the week, they also have Spanish in the IB schools and music and media, just like the big kids do in grades 1 through 5. And they've got time, choice time, they've got recess, they've got lunch, and they're busy little learners. You're going to see some evidence of that in a minute.
So before I start, I just want to say that I feel really privileged to work with those 16 teachers, and I'm so happy that we finally have full-day kindergarten. It's so long past due. I thought it would be there when I started teaching 22 years ago, and it took this long. So, all right. So some of the recommendations that came about, one of the biggest ones was a phonics program called PALS, Peer Assisted Learning. And in PALS, the students, and this is in the IB schools, at PSI we have National Geographic. It's their new phonics program. They didn't have PALS in Spanish, but both of the programs are being well implemented. In a PALS lesson, the teacher does a whole class lesson working on phonemic awareness and then moving to letter sounds. They work on sight words, they work on reading CVC words, and eventually they read books. So in this lesson, we can see that the student with the pencil is the coach, and the other student is the reader. And the students are taught very explicitly how to be a coach and how to be a reader. And when they are, for example, if the student makes a mistake, they know exactly what to say. They say, no, what sound? Oh, that sound is puh. Try that a sound again. And you can hear it. They have the thing memorized, and they know exactly what to say and how to coach each other. It's very respectful. And the kids, they like it. They like to work with each other. And the coach is the coach for 3 rounds, and then they switch. And the students are paired based on assessment data and some social things too, we have to bear in mind. So that's been a big piece of it. These lessons are 3 to 4 times a week, lasting about 15 to 20 minutes. Another big piece that we've been trying to implement that is different is a lot more small group instruction. So in order to do that, there's some things that we've had to put in place. As you might imagine, if a teacher needs to work with 4 to 6 kindergartners at the table, the other 20 have to be doing something productive. So that takes a lot of work and planning. We can see in this lesson, one of our teachers is doing a small group guided reading lesson with the students and working through a small book that she is probably focusing on. Looks like maybe CBC words, I'm not sure. This is an assistant doing a small group lesson. We are very fortunate to have assistants in the room, and they are very heavily used in every way. And this teacher is also working with a group. This is assistant rather over at Aquila, and she is working with a group of students as well. So one of the things that the teachers do in order to be able to work with small groups is do literacy stations. And they have different literacy activities that the students rotate through. In this one, we can see the student is working on building a word based on little puzzles at the bottom, applying his phonics, and then he writes the word after that. And each of the literacy stations last about 12 to 15 minutes. In this one, he's rolling, this isn't a math game, he's actually rolling the dice, and then when he gets the number, he recognizes the number and he writes down whatever the targeted sight word is. And this little guy, he made progress at the beginning of the year, and now it's amazing. I just want to say that I worked with him at the beginning of the year and talked with him recently, and the growth has been phenomenal. In this one, we see the students listening to books on tape. Typically, those are trade books, things that the teachers get from Scholastic. These students are doing writing, and there's usually a prompt for the students, and they write a little story about it. There's a picture. Every teacher has a different sort of set of things that they do, that they move the students through. These students are listening to whisper phones, so that they can not have to be able to hear themselves. Only they can hear themselves read. As you might imagine, kindergartners are a little loud when they read. And so the whisper phones really help keep the room just, don't want to say quiet, but maybe a little quieter. The iPads have been awesome. The kids, as you might imagine, love the iPads, and you can see these 2 students, they have a case around the iPad that's really a nice kind of protection because 5-year-olds can be a bit clumsy. They have headphones, and they use a variety of literacy apps, and the teachers have them set up so the students can't just roam freely on the iPad. They're under guided access, and they can only use whichever app is up for the students. There are reading apps that they do. There are letters, sounds. There's math apps. There's a lot of things that the students do. They wouldn't use a math app at this time, but mostly literacy apps. Here's some other students. You can see that some of them are reading, some of them are doing apps on the iPad. Looks like a pretty cozy, happy place. And this young fellow is reading, and his friend is on the iPad. And the kids, I think they handle it really well. They know they're going to get their turn on the iPad, and there isn't any, they're not worried about it. They just are excited about everything, and the iPads are just another thing that they do. One of the big things that I have been helping the teachers with is establishing a read to self. And so, again, imagine a 5-year-old. Our goal is for the 5-year-olds to read to self for 15 minutes. That's a pretty amazing task. We start at 2, and we work our way up. But if you can imagine, they all have book boxes. They need to have about 15 books or items in that book box to keep them busy for that 15 minutes. And we call it building stamina. and we keep track of how many minutes the class is on task and reading to self the whole time. And this little girl, I'm not sure if this is at PSI or not. I've worked with all the teachers in all the buildings on this, and the kids are really excited about it and take it very seriously. So here's another little guy. You can see the teacher in the background is working with a group of students. And another part that we work on is partner reading, so the students can use those same book boxes, and then we establish a routine. That lasts about 8 to 12 minutes, not quite as long as read to self, but we're getting there. Reading with the partner, they learn different. They read, I read, you read, they read together, they do a check for understanding, so that all along when they're doing the reading, we're always going back to reading is about meaning and conversation and thinking. And there's another little couple guys doing some read to self. And these guys. And I just want to say at this last place that we've had a lot of professional development. We were all trained with PALS. Additionally, we received training in an intervention program called PRESS, that's out of the University of Minnesota, that we are using this year. We've had guided reading training that's continuing. We've had some developmentally appropriate, rigorous training from out of the University of Minnesota. I and 3 of our newer kindergarten teachers are going to go to a kindergarten workshop to do some training. And, we always have Carrie, so we feel really fortunate to have her as a resource. So it's been an amazing year, and I feel really fortunate to be a part of it.
So, why is all-day kindergarten important? Because it offers an extended period of learning, so we can have a wider variety of opportunities for kids and balance active and more quiet periods. As Kelly said, I'm not sure what quiet means in kindergarten, but there can be studious times, there can be academic times, there can be times that are more free. And we can be better aligned with what we are doing in 1 through 5. It was really hard to do that when we had a half-day kindergarten program and then different programs of full-day kindergarten. Now we have a much better idea of when our kindergartners leave their grade level, what to expect when they come to our first grade. Actually, our grade 1 task force starts meeting this week, so we're already getting folks together and being planful about what first grade needs to look like, knowing all the wonderful things that kids are learning in kindergarten this year. And at our first meeting, our kindergarten task force members are going to join us. So we're going to have kind of like a ceremonial handoff or something about the work. It also gives kids and teachers more time to go deeper and more in depth. There's lots of great explorations and lots of inquiry and lots of good learning opportunities for young students that kindergarten is specifically designed for. We have been more intentional this year too about monitoring the data in our kindergarten programs. We're using a new math assessment tool this year. I don't have slides for you on math because it is brand new to us. It's going to be our baseline year, so it would be really hard to talk about it in depth. But we're really excited about having an opportunity to include K and 1 in our longitudinal data that we collect on students. We typically haven't been able to start that since 2nd grade. And we now can be more systematic about monitoring not only individual student growth, but grade level growth and classroom growth over the course of a cohort. So what you see here is our fall data and our winter data. We just finished collecting our winter data at the end of January. And the dotted line represents if we stay on track where we will be by the end of the year. Our goal is to have 80% of our kindergartners on grade level by the end of the school year. We're going to be really close. We've are a little bit more than halfway to that goal right now. We started with some significant opportunities, but as Kelly explained, the teachers are working really hard, and we're being really purposeful and intentional about the learning opportunities we offer for students. This is just a chart for the IB schools of where they're assessed in English. And PSI, they're assessed in Spanish. And so this is a little bit of a different conversation, not really necessarily something that we can monitor the same way that we do the information we get from the IB schools. We don't have the same norms, for example, in kindergarten in the Spanish FAST test that we do. But what you have is, if you can see it, I know it's hard to see on the screen, the blue bars indicate the fall scores, and the red bars indicate the winter scores. So in the fall, we had a larger number of students that were farthest away from grade level or high risk is the way that it's listed in the assessment. We had a few students with some risk, and then we have the majority of our kids with low risk. So another way to look at it is when students are in the low risk category, they're most likely to achieve grade level outcomes and also most likely to be reading well by third grade. Just a couple of things to note. On May 20th, mark your calendars for Book Bonanza. We're going to have a fun event for our kindergarten families where there'll be books and fun and games. We want all of our kindergartners to go home with some reading material for the summer, so we're going to have a community event on May 10th. And then we're already planning, May 20th. Thank you, Jim. We're already planning ahead for next year's kindergarten. So March 24th is kindergarten roundup at all of our elementary schools. Folks in our community should have already received information about that. And then in late August, early September, we'll be doing Welcome to Kindergarten meetings with teachers. And then September 9th will already be the first day of the class of 2028.
Amazing. Thank you.
Amazing, yes.
Are there questions from board members? Ken?
I was looking at the IB numbers, that little slide there, and just wondering, do we have data on how many of the kids attended preschool and what those preschools look like, or how many did not?
We do not have that data. We are working on a plan for students that go to preschool here in St. Louis Park. The assessments that they do link to the assessments that we give, so we're trying to find a way to bridge that data so we can have even more information on students before they come to us or their experiences before they come to us. But we don't have a lot of information about preschool experiences or where they were.
Why I was asking, because the black kids seem to still be lagging, and I was just wondering if it could be, well, definitely something before they get to school, but
It is the
what is
$20
it?
million question, and I know that there are people that are working on helping us get that information, like having students have MARS numbers before they come to school so we can go back and track that information. Hopefully soon. We'll have more opportunities to hit the ground running in kindergarten.
Didn't you include some of our preschool teachers in the kindergarten planning task force? So hopefully we've built some alignment there.
We did, yeah, and they're going to be joining us for that launch into the grade 1 task force as well.
Bruce?
Carrie, when I look at the IB numbers, it's a nice upward trend. It's beautiful, and I'm proud of the teachers and proud of what Kelly and her team is doing. My question becomes, when we started funding this originally, we started it, and then people paid for it, and now the state is funding it, and fortunately at a 1.0 level at this point. That's a good thing. The deal is, though, we said by third grade everybody would be at grade level. Now I heard we want 80% at grade level. If they kept up this kind of projection, it appears to me, and again I tried to kind of mentally look 3 years ahead and say, we ought to have a large, more than 80% will be at grade level by third grade, and I think that was the original intent, was it?
Yeah,
not?
our goal is to have all kids, 80% of our kids at grade level by the end of kindergarten. So then let's shoot for the moon and say 90% by the end of first grade and 95 by the end of second grade. We're on track to do that. We have every intention of doing that.
Any other questions? Oh, Rob.
I just want to add a couple things. one of the many things I've learned from Carrie is support that kindergarten teachers and all teachers require to get this done, and Kelly is there as a former outstanding kindergarten teacher to provide that support. So one of the things that we did this year that we haven't done before, and it's proven to work, we need to copy it now, is do the research and find the best practice for what all-day kindergarten should look like, which we did last year. Get the right materials and supplies and supports for the classroom teachers. But then have someone like Kelly that has the expertise and the time to literally go from room to room to room to room and support the teachers in their work. And if something isn't working right, Kelly is right there to catch it. If teachers need something, she's right there to hear it and get them what they need. And that ongoing support has been critical, and one of the reasons we're seeing such good results. So as we go into the first grade task force, which as Carrie said is coming within a week here, a couple of things that are going through my mind is, first of all, the handoff from kindergarten to first grade, making sure that if students are coming to first grade farther along than they have been in the past, that our first grade teachers are ready to capitalize on that and have high expectations for them, and be familiar with the processes that are being used in all-day K, so that when the students get to first grade, the students are going to know what they've been doing. The teachers need to know what they've been doing and keep right on going with a clean handoff. And then second of all, to provide the same support to the first grade teachers that we have for the kindergarten teachers. The kindergarten teachers have done a very good job with actually quite large class sizes for kindergarten, and it's still working because of the kind of support they've been getting and their dedication. So the handoff to first grade is important, and I'm glad Carrie and Kelly will be there to help with that process.
And I just want to commend the process that you've gone through, too. By coincidence, a little bit by coincidence, I've been talking to the people at the University of Minnesota who know most about kindergarten, talking about what effective all-day kindergarten looks like. And they said, oh, yeah, St. Louis Park. I talked to St. Louis Park. And in part because I went to Carrie to ask who she had worked with. But as I've gone with others, my point being that I appreciate that you reached out to people who know about research and evidence-based practice. You found PRESS, which is a very promising research-based instructional method, and using FAST, you mentioned at PSI, and I don't think most districts have reached out in that same way, and I don't think most of them, from what I've heard, have gone through the detailed planning that we did for all-day kindergarten. I know of one that said in June, oh yeah, we better figure out what we're doing next fall, kind of thing. And so I think that's rewarding. So I've been checking off all the things that they were telling me about all-day K as you went through. And the two things that I explicitly hear that I think are in there and are my question to you. One is just the importance of working with kids at that age on how to learn and how to be with each other. Teams, collaboration, just getting along with each other. They must be learning that because you talked about all the partner kinds of activities and small groups being able to learn independently. The other theme I heard from the University of Minnesota folks was the importance of play, that kids at that age are learning through play-based activity. So can you just tell me how those two items are addressed, whether it's Carrie or Kelly, I don't care.
I'll start, and then Kelly's going to have to jump in for the details. We have a great opportunity here in St. Louis Park that we have Amy Sisman-Stillman as a parent. And so she's provided some of that professional development for our teachers about what is developmentally appropriate rigor, where does choice fit in. And I think we are no different than any other district in the state of Minnesota. We are working really hard to make sure all of our students have access to the outcomes and make it developmentally appropriate. So we are a work in progress on that. We dedicate choice time every day. Probably not the same amount of choice time that we've had in the past, where when I went to kindergarten, it was nap time and free play for most of the afternoon. So we're trying to find that happy medium, and we're already making plans for how we're going to tweak that next year. And the teachers do work really hard with kids to work collaboratively. We have Responsive Classroom that we use. Daily 5 is another framework that we use. And PALS, taught by Kristen McMasters, is also influencing kids on how to work together and how to coach each other and build that community, so that when somebody makes a mistake, that's just part of learning. That's not something that is a bad thing, especially in kindergarten. It's all about experience and all about inquiry. So I think there's more Kelly would say.
I think I would just add that, you can see that the teachers are teaching the kids how to read, but it's very developmentally appropriate. We don't have kids doing worksheets. It's games. It's engaging with books. It's a very positive. Kids don't feel stressed. They're just playing, and they don't know they're learning to read. They just are.
I would add that for math too. There's a lot of manipulatives, there's a lot of gameplay, and there's a lot of small group instruction happening in math. So they're learning about how to think about numbers through play.
Wonderful. Karen?
Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that first time when they gather at the morning meeting, because Responsive Classroom means a lot to us here, but maybe not so much to people out watching.
Okay. Well, morning meeting is typically where the teacher gathers all the students together, and probably the very first thing you teach them in kindergarten is how to greet each other. That can take a while. Just how to say hi and get that to go around the circle. It's an opportunity for the students to share a little bit about what's going on in their lives or what have you. And usually there's a game component of some sort. And then that usually moves into some kind of a morning message that always has a literacy piece and maybe a little game attached to it that might be connected to literacy as well. I think the other pieces of Responsive Classroom that are really important are logical consequences. The teachers are still using that. The take a break chair, those kinds of things are all taught and scaffolded in as the students move through the year. I think the other thing is they don't assume that the student knows how to use any tool. They are explicitly taught how to use the crayons, how to use the pencil, how to use the scissors, where they put those things, all of that stuff. If you go into the kindergarten rooms in the fall, a lot of times you'll see things covered up, and it'll say opening soon, because there's always a little bit of a ceremony about the right way to do things and teaching kids how to do those things so that they are empowered to do them themselves, but also respectfully.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the presentation. And with that, we'll move to the other end of the spectrum and our annual report from the high school from Scott Myers and Carrie Schwettering. We should say Scott is our interim principal and Carrie's the interim assistant principal, but they've both been with the school and the district for many years.
I have to say, as I'm getting ready here, as a parent of a 5-year-old, I'm very much indebted to the kindergarten teachers working with my son. He's one who is teaching me or confusing me a little bit more about what it means for a kindergartner to be quiet sometimes. So I commend them for their work. Okay. Hopefully that's showing up on the screen here. I'm just going to do a quick, there we go, perfect. It's hard for the folks here to see the bottom. So Thank you, board members and Superintendent Metz, for the opportunity to present our annual report here for the high school. As I was just introduced, I'm Scott Myers, the interim principal at the high school, and joining me is Carrie Schwiedering, the interim assistant principal. We're just going to walk through an overall report here of what's happening at the high school. And I'll just kind of open up by giving a little bit of context. Actually, both of us will give a little bit of context in terms of what's happening. So all the work right now at the high school is guided by many things, but there's a few overarching principles that I have just shared up on the screen here. There's the world's best workforce is guiding a lot of our work, and just as a quick overview, that's predominantly reading and math proficiency scores on the MCA. And the nice part about using the world's best workforce is it works into different demographic categories and gives us kind of an overarching look at how our school is doing. Career and college readiness is some new legislation to schools this year, but the St. Louis Park High School is at home right now with career and college readiness because it's been part of the planning process since we've started talking about our academy process, and also some of the advisory days that you may hear students talking about from time to time. Also, a part of the process at the high school for quite a while is equity coaching and our building instructional leaders. And these are opportunities for teachers to see one another and to coach one another in terms of what some of the best and most effective strategies are for reaching all of our students. And then this year will be an exciting year because our principal and teacher development and evaluation system, or TDE as it's referred to from time to time, has been aligned so that principals and teachers are gauged on some of the same achievement goals and some of the same equity-based practices. So it's exciting whenever you hear principals and teachers and actually our superintendent, as the case may be this year, are aligned with some of the same evaluation practices. We're taking an approach that has multiple perspectives, and I'll have Carrie Schwiedering talk to us a little bit about that.
So a couple of things when Scott and I got together to show a little bit about what our students and the success that they've had here. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at from multiple points, not just one test or one measure. And so a couple of the things that we'll talk about tonight is assessments obviously is one that's important for us and our students. And so there are a couple here that I'm going to highlight that we are taking this year with our students. The first one is Measures of Academic Progress, which is MAP. And that is a test that is in reading and math. And for our students, they will take it in 9th grade and in 10th grade. And we take it in the fall and then again in the spring. So it's measuring growth overall. We do have some smaller populations that will take it in the winter as well. But for the most part, it's a fall to spring test for our 9th and 10th grade students. The second one is the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, which is the MCA. 10th graders take it in reading, and 11th graders take it in math, and that will be coming up in the middle of April. New to us this year is the OLPA, which is the Optional Local Purpose Assessment, and what that is it's a practice for 10th grade students in reading to prepare them for the MCA. And actually they are at the high school taking it currently right now, last week and this week. The other one that we take for 10th grade, and that's actually a practice or a way to guide them as they start into the ACT, is the PLAN test. And so the PLAN test was something that all of our 10th grade students took this fall. And that leads us to our ACT. And ACT is not a new test, but it will be new for us this year as it will be given for all 11th graders. And that date is actually April 28th. So April 28th, all 11th graders across the state, but also here at St. Louis Park, will be taking that ACT test. The other pieces that we want to make sure that we acknowledge is the fact that we are also looking constantly at academics. And so with academics, focus of our school has been passing rates and really looking at the success that our students are having within their classes. And so that's a goal for us, looking at grades, passing rates, and then even professional and personal goals that teachers are setting are based around that. And then the last piece that we will touch on is a bit on climate. It's really important of how our students feel within this building. And so we gauge that in a couple of different ways. One, early here in January, we had a school climate survey given to a group of students across 9th through 12th grade that talked a little bit about how they feel about being in the school and how connected they are. And Scott will share some of those pieces later on in our presentation. And then there's also, as Scott mentioned earlier, with TD&E, the teacher development and evaluation, that part of the plan is that teachers will be giving student engagement surveys to a select group of their classes, and that hopefully, and the idea behind it, and teachers are excited about it, and we're excited to be able to move through this, is the idea of how do students feel about the learning that's happening within their classroom. So it's really getting down to a personal level. So we're trying to look at the whole school climate, and then even in individual classrooms with individual teachers, how do students feel about the learning that they're having here at St. Louis Park. I'll just touch briefly a little bit about our demographics here. The first slide is, this is a 3-year look at what our demographics have been. And if you take a look, you can see overall within the past 3 years, they have stayed consistent. We have about 60% of our student body is white, 25% is black, and 15% breaks down the American Indian, Asian, and Hispanic population. But overall, it's been very consistent over the past 3 years. This slide tells us a little bit about the specific populations according to our demographics. So again, the important piece that we take a look at is the percentages have stayed consistent. So that just helps us to kind of know that our population is remaining very similar as we move through within at least the past 3 years.
All right. As I had spoke before, the World's Best Workforce is a guiding presence in our work at all times here. And the current reading proficiency scores that are displayed are part of that World's Best Workforce goal-setting process, but also for us to reflect on our work. I'll talk just briefly about this slide here. You'll notice there's a green line in the middle of the screen there, and that's talking about when we switched from the MCA 2 to the MCA 3 for reading. And that happened a couple of years ago, as you can see. So some of what we're learning about as we go through this process is readjusting and realigning standards. And then some of it is taking a look at what the practices are that we have in our building. Likewise, math is also part of the World's Best Workforce Plan. And so when we take a look at this slide, you can see there's a green line indicating the division once again between our MCA 2 test and our new MCA 3 test. And in this case, 2014 was the year for the new MCA 3 version. And really what that means is there has been a change or adjustment in the standards. And so as you can tell, even though we're a couple of years off between the two tests, we're definitely keeping focused on staying current with what those standards are in both curriculum areas.
So one thing is important for us at any level, but certainly at the high school, is to make sure that we're not just taking snapshots on one day of one test. And so the MAP, which is the Measures of Academic Progress, helps us guide where our instruction needs to be. So this slide is just basically showing you a little bit about students who take the MAP in the fall, and this is reading, and we also do it with MAP. That helps us predict how proficient they will be on the state tests coming up that spring. So that just helps us guide what our instruction is and helps us be able to meet the needs of our students.
As Carrie had mentioned earlier in the assessment portion of our presentation, one of our new assessments here is the plan test. And the screen that you're looking at right now is actually something that we're learning about since this is baseline data. So it's similar to any first year where we take a look at plan scores and we think about them in terms of our 10th graders in the fall and how that might be an indicator of where they may end up in April as an 11th grader next year taking the ACT. There's quite a bit more that I could talk for quite a while about in terms of what we're doing for career and college readiness. But there are exploratory activities happening in advisory lessons right now, as well as some articulated classwork in our academies that are supposed to pair up with this plan test and some of the information it gives us. It also is connected to the 8th grade Explore test, which broadens out the spectrum all the way back to 8th grade, all the way to 12th grade. So there's a lot of exciting things about career pathways happening with career and college readiness. When we move back to what are the multiple pathways to meet our goals, or how are we going to work on the world's best workforce plan, two major pieces come into play this year. One is the equity framework, and we have a rich history in St. Louis Park of valuing equity. What we're trying to do this year is focus in on equity in terms of our equity coaches, professional learning communities, meeting our students' needs, as you see up here on the screen, and student groups to incorporate student voices, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I just want to highlight one really important piece of our framework is to look at the baseline standards and ensure that they're aligned. And thank you to cooperation with our middle school and Carrie Ross. We've made some great gains in terms of looking at how aligned that curriculum is, and I think that's a good starting point for any equity-based activities. And then at the bottom of the screen here, in the near future here, we're looking at things like Power School and Schoology to increase our parent involvement. We're working on parent advisory councils. We actually have a couple different varieties at the high school, especially if we include the district parent advisory committee. Some more automated contact. But one exciting piece, and Kara Mueller in our business department is working to help coordinate some exciting nights for students to prepare for ACTs, but also for students to prepare the FAFSAs, which is the financial aid form for student aid that we're trying to assist parents and students and families to fill out on February 19th here coming up. So that's another way we'd like to have our parents get involved if possible.
Okay, so Scott and I would like to shift a little bit about what we're doing already at the high school that we believe is our hope to impact the gap. And so this is some work that we're currently doing this year. One of our focuses has been on professional learning communities, or PLCs, and the idea behind PLCs is really being able to get a group of educators together to have a data-driven common focus of being able to measure if what they're doing is working, and then being able to use a plan of tweaking that and changing that and engaging each other and how that looks with our students. So one of the times that we've been able to shift this year that's been really helpful for us is at the high school. A few years back, we shifted a later start time twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the idea was really to be able to kind of have that common time in the day built in where teachers could be able to collaborate and work for the betterment of our students. And so we are using Thursdays as that time for all staff, so not just teachers, all staff in the building on Thursday mornings to be able to work in their PLCs. And so, again, it gives us the common time. It also allows the opportunity for Scott and I to be able to go and visit and work with and support. It allows our equity coaches to go into the different PLCs and work with the needs that they have. So we've seen some huge gains already with that, just in the appreciation of the time. I mean, it's always about not enough time, and this allows for that. But also just even the accountability that we're able to have regarding that. Yes, Jude?
I thought, are they always using it for PLCs? I thought there was some time extra for students who needed assistance as well, and that's why the time was also benefited. So is it always just Thursdays is PLC time and Tuesdays student time, or how?
Yeah, so Tuesday and Thursdays are the times that we have the 20-minute later start day. Students still arrive at the same time, but that is also the time on Tuesdays. And the Thursday times, I should clarify, is that it's twice a month. So really, they would have Tuesdays, students can meet with teachers, and then also twice a month on Thursdays. So it's twice a month that they're able to have that set time within their PLC. So thank you for clarifying that or questioning that. The Schoology piece, though, that we've really been able to capitalize on is it is a mission of the district that we are going to be able to use Schoology to work, obviously, with our classes and with students, and also be able to branch out to parents. So one of the things that Scott and I felt really important is to model that. And so we have created a PLC Schoology page for every single PLC within our building. So that allows us to have individual, small group, very pointed conversations, be able to have ongoing curriculum, professional development, things like that will happen. So that's allowed, Schoology has allowed us to have that connectedness and that accountability with teachers on a consistent basis and have a real clean way to do that. So that's helped us. The other piece is the professional development team. So we always had a professional development team at the high school. The shift this year has been a little bit with the shift of what our early release and late start and full days of professional development have been. So the shift used to be more building related, and the shift this year has become more district wide. And that's allowed us again to have that common vision and that connectedness throughout the district, which I think is really helpful. And so that shift for our professional development team within the high school now isn't as much on what are we doing within the early release and late starts, and it's more on how are we helping and engaging staff and getting them what they need to best support our students ongoing. So really the shift from professional development has moved to helping PLCs and working with different PLCs.
Right, another important component to how we're working to close the gap is to include student voices in the conversation. We've had quite a few of the groups that are listed on the screen right now for multiple years, but we're realizing as we enter into the conversation where we start asking for student feedback, we've had some mechanisms here at the high school that have allowed students to share their voice. So just to briefly overview, we have the High Achievement Program, which is for students of color who are attempting classes that are in our higher levels, so honors, IB, and AP are just a few to add. In the very, very near future, and actually right now, we have some of our articulated classes which we're realizing are pushing into that challenging realm. So when we start talking about career and college readiness, I think our High Achievement Program is going to include some of those classes that we're realizing are challenging our students and needing support. We also have a Latino Circle. We have a Boys to Men group, which is a leadership group for Black boys. We have a Young Women of Divine Achievement, or YODA, as it's known in our building, and that is for the young Black leaders, young Black female leaders in our building. We also have a group called the African Middle Eastern group. We're seeing an increasing need for the voice of these students in our building. This group was known in our building before, and some of these groups you'll see from time to time might shift their names because the leaders of those groups are able to influence that. So don't be afraid to ask us if you're wondering, hey, I saw a group, I'm wondering which students this includes. And then one of the more exciting pieces we have right now is a student organization against racism. And in light of some of the social media events and events out in society, we've had a motivated group of students who wanted to say something and do something about racism. And this group is pretty new to even organizing. They organized partway through the year here. And this is a group for any students interested in having the conversation about racism. And the first couple meetings, they've made kind of an agreement to keep it local, personal, and immediate, which follows some of the Pacific education groups. So we're excited to see some of the themes and questions and concerns that students that meet in that group have, mainly because it'll be a combination of students that meet there, and they're able to show us some of the pieces that they've discussed together and talked through. Also continuing, I had mentioned about this earlier, but we have our equity coaches here. So this is more of a resource for our teachers, but it's resources for our teachers that is based in how students are receiving instruction. So equity coaches, just to quickly review, are teachers who are assigned to lead building instruction with the focus on student engagement. So if you think of a traditional observation where maybe the teacher was observed, I always think of maybe shifting to the side of the classroom and looking more at that interaction. Our building instructional leaders, or BILs, in our ATPPS program are also joining this work along with the equity coaches. And some of the strategies that we're using right now include lessons that are based on focal students to try to start to incorporate strategies that may benefit one or multiple students. And then to analyze and create questions of higher level thinking to start to create engagement at a higher level. And then just share and analyze student feedback, hopefully through some of the teacher development and evaluation process.
Okay, next pieces that we are working on at the high school is a program that is obviously not new to the high school, but it's the Building Assets Reducing Risks of the BAR program. And that has been the idea around common teachers, common students, and two pillars of that program, which is really branched out throughout our school, is looking at relationships, connecting students to students, students to staff, and staff to staff, and looking at data, real-time data, to be able to guide where we're moving. And so we look at that, and we've been able to move that into the block system a bit more. So our 10th graders are more commonly blocked in the idea that they have common groups of students who are using the same teachers kind of moving through the day. So again, in that morning time of that Tuesday and Thursday, there is time for PLCs, and there also is that time for common teachers to be able to meet. And so that's been helpful for us to be able to move our work as well. Advisories is another piece that 9 through 12 we use, and we have advisory days. And that's where a lot of the junior, senior teachers are available, that their advisors could stop in and see them in the morning and be able to connect with them. But the idea around advisory is that teachers are actually tracking a group of students and being able to connect with a group of students, so that, again, we're having multiple opportunities for students to feel connected to the building. And then part of that as well, with this, the bar expansion, is we do have a supported group of 11th grade, and then we also have the NTA, which is the non-traditional academy. And so it's seniors who have a different way of just being able to experience high school, that maybe that they haven't been as successful, or maybe just would like an opportunity to try it a different way, and the NTA has been able to provide that for them. And we've had it for the last few years now, and have had great success and results regarding that. The next piece that I would like to talk about, which is really dear to me in the role that I have as the assistant principal at the high school, is our work around restorative practices. And last year we had a district discipline committee that we meet on a regular 2 to 3 year cycle, and we take a look at what our student parent handbook is and what kind of discipline guidelines we have, and see if there's things that need to be clarified, changed. And one of the big pieces that came out of that was the idea around restorative practices. And so I put that comment in there that is actually at the forefront of our work, and is actually at the forefront of in the actual parent and student handbook, which is our district is committed to employing restorative practices whenever appropriate and possible. And so the idea around it is there's a number of avenues and a number of different ways that we are using this, but really the idea behind it is building bridges with students, with staff, with families, really to create a positive climate in the school. So things are going to happen. It is a high school, and we understand that. It doesn't mean that consequences or things won't come from that. But how can we repair? How can we heal? How can we make this a place that hopefully will prevent it from happening again, and also just be able to create what St. Louis Park is and where we want to be and where we want to learn.
Before I move into this next slide, I should just take a brief moment to thank Lauren Buxton. She's our director of students at the high school, and she's an integral part of looking at these restorative practices, and actually has been a champion of bringing some of the information to us, not only this year while she's in the director of students position, but also last year as a social worker in our building. So she's another person who has been a real big help in helping us employ those restorative practices. Kind of moving to restorative or relational practices, if we take a look here, one of our next steps has to do with the compass, and I do apologize, I'm realizing this isn't projecting well here. Hopefully at home you can see it a little bit better. Our district has been engaged in courageous conversations for quite a few years here, and there's been some extensive training with teachers that focuses around this compass. And just to quickly describe one way that it's utilized at the high school, as teachers, we tend to be strongly grounded in the thinking and doing quadrants of this compass, and we talk a lot about standards and assessments, and at times we tend to get away from the believing and the feeling quadrants, which are opposed to, or on the other side. I shouldn't say opposed, because really the idea of this compass is when you move towards the center and make decisions in your building that have to do with considering all 4 quadrants, you're able to make some more centered and more equitable decisions. So we wanted to include this here just to say this is something that's guiding our work and our conversation, not only at staff meetings, but also as we talk with students and work through mediations.
I'll just touch briefly on the next steps that we will be doing as we finish up even this school year, as we're halfway through. Obviously, the first bullet here is to continue what we are doing. So the things that we talked about, which we feel is working in our building, we want to continue to do those and expand and improve on those. The next step that we're doing here is coming up even at the end of this month and into next month is a team of high school staff along with some district leaders. We're going to be focusing about bringing equitable and empowering change through our work with PD support. So the idea about that is that we're going to be coming together to do some next steps, and part of that process will be looking at a comprehensive organizational assessment. It's going to be able to survey our staff. Where are we with a lot of different processes, but where are we that it helps us know where we need to go. So we can make a lot of assumptions about where staff is in their work that they're doing around equity and with our students, but until we actually ask and be able to look at it in an organized way, that will help us guide where we're going. And then we're going to continue to work with Schoology as a tool and a resource within our staff and branching it out to parents. We're looking forward to that. And then also the continued curriculum alignment. I know our math team, along with Carrie Ross and our English department as well, are doing a lot of great work, and so we'll continue to support them on this important journey.
All right, this is always one of my favorite parts of this presentation, as I get to brag a little bit about the great work that's happening from a lot of dedicated staff members and even more dedicated students at times, and also parent support at home. So if we were to tell our school cultural story, I think there are three categories that stand out. One is academics, and as we take a look at academics, we've received some magazine ratings in the past, and I'd like to just share an update on those. So in the Washington Post, we were the number 4 high school in Minnesota. U.S. News and World Report had us ranked as the number 7 high school. We also had a very distinguished award last year in terms of our ACT College and Career Transition Award, and that was a national honor that we were given last year. And I think it probably happened after our board presentation, but I know that there was some mention of it. I just wanted to share again to make people aware. We had an 84.2 passing rate for our semester 1, so this would be students that achieved all the credits they attempted. So 84.2% of our students achieved all the credits they attempted. And last year, in 2013, we had an 89.9 graduation rate, and we're eagerly waiting to see where our rating was this year. As you could tell by the components of our presentation, equity is also a strong piece of our story here at the high school. Once again, the picture isn't projecting as well in this room, but there's a great group of students there. There are natural helpers who are kind of revitalized this year as a student group. This is a group of students who have kind of dedicated themselves to helping out their peers, much like our brave kindergartners who are doing the work in the kindergarten classroom. We have high school students tackling some academic issues and sometimes some deeper issues with their classmates. We also wanted just to report that in our HAT program, we have students who students once again who are identifying as Hispanic or African American. We have 139 students that attempted 340 AP and IB honors classes, and I shouldn't say attempted because those are the earned credits that they had there too. So pretty impressive group. The passing rate amongst those students was 96%, so definitely some impressive work there, and I should say thank you to Leanne Stevens, who's putting in a lot of hard work with our students of color to give support and to give us idea as teachers on how we can better educate a wider variety of students. And then 89% of our students are reporting they feel comfortable around students of different races, and this is coming from our climate survey. So obviously we're humbled and very proud of our students for the examples they're showing us on a daily basis. The community then, you couldn't really mention St. Louis Park without thinking about the community. To the right here is a picture of our Oriole Code, which is a little bit of review probably for our school board. For those of you watching at home, if you haven't seen it before, this was developed by a dedicated group of students who really just wanted to define kind of what it means to be an Oriole. Amongst some of the community news there, as some of the examples, and I'll allude to it in a second, but we were the 2015 Best High School by the Sun Sailor Reader's Choice. 82% of our students feel like they belong at our school. Carrie and I were talking about this. We would love if that number was 100%, so that's always our goal, but we were pretty happy with an 82% rating and willing to work towards that 100% mark. And then we also have an increase of our students seeking assistance from our student office and counseling office. And this really speaks to the upstander and the integrity piece. We have students returning $1 bills found in the hallway. We have students returning credit cards found in the parking lot. Students seeking mediation, sometimes for themselves or friends, and students seeking help for some of their students or their friends struggling with mental illness in our counseling office and our student office. So I'm once again really impressed and humbled by our students. And I'd just like to wrap things up by saying thank you to our wonderfully talented staff, dedicated students, families, and community. We really appreciate your support.
And thank you to you for that thorough presentation. There's a lot going on. Questions from the board? Joe.
Thanks for the presentation. It was great to hear all the great things that are going on. I had a question about the gender equity group. So that was something that came up last year, and I don't know if that's continued into this year or if those main students had graduated and it petered out, or I was just kind of curious where that is now.
Yeah, that was again another a great example of students that worked together to see if there were some possibilities. The students that were predominantly interested in our gender equity group have decided to join our GSA group to have a conversation about gender roles there, because obviously amongst our GLBT groups there's conversations about that. So it was kind of interesting to see the groups had made a decision to join together. Part of it was helpful because I know the advisor was somebody who was willing to make that leap, but the students themselves actually started the conversation, and then we had a brief conversation when we had our new clubs forming, and that was the result. So I was impressed by their recognition of some common goals amongst the groups.
Thank you.
Other questions? Bruce?
You spoke a lot about the world's best workforce. And I'm not sure that everybody at home knows what that is. It might be really good to have a presentation on that. Just from a high school perspective, we've heard a lot about all the things they were talking about were about world's best workforce. And so that was cool. But there are 5 key goals to it. And that may be good because good to present, simply because when we put together our strategic planning group, that is the requirement of the legislation to address each of those 5. And the early ones that we discussed in our early childhood education, we talked about 3 of them with the high school, but the 2 of them we talked about with our early one. And so it's really important for everybody to understand that this is something, it's not something that's nice to talk about. It is a requirement, it's legislatively required, and it has to be addressed in our strategic plan process.
We'll think about how that fits in. We certainly talked about the plan last year, but it's something we can revisit every year, so good point. Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. Appreciated learning everything that's going on at the high school, and we look forward to the charts next year and going up. That looks great.
All right, thank you.
We'll turn it over now to the fiscal 2015 budget amendments. And so that is back to Sandy Celine.
Well, this is looking a little fuzzy here, so hopefully the others can see this better on the screen. Every year about this time, what I do is I go through the current year's budget and do an analysis based on what we know at this point in time, and looking at the various components of our budget to see if there's any changes that need to happen. And with that, I'll go through what kind of adjustments that I'm going to propose for the board to approve tonight. For the unreserved, unassigned fund balance, for the revenues, we did have additional enrollment above and beyond what we had anticipated during our original budget process. Therefore, adding general education revenue of a little over $510,000. There were some adjustments that we noticed for during the audit process. What we did last year is we accrue for estimates of what we think our revenue is going to be, because a lot of what we do during the audit process is based on estimates. And we go back at this point in time, we get the final information from the state of what those revenues actuals are really going to be. So we noticed some decreases in various accruals that we had put in for the different revenue sources. One was for the special ed revenue, which we're going to decrease by $125,000. The desegregation revenue, it's a desegregation transportation revenue, which we're going to decrease by $85,000. Integration revenue, which we're going to decrease by $55,000. And also, we did not budget for our literacy incentive aid. That's one aid that we don't know we're really going to get until after the fact. So we've been kind of conservative with that over these few years, but we have been increasing a reserve for that literacy incentive aid in our reserves. And so we're going to be putting the revenues as well as the expenditures in for the budget amendments at this point in time. Therefore, the total revenue for the unreserved, unassigned fund balance is a little over $512,000. And then looking at the expenditures, the first two are just basically offsetting each other. We're just moving the OPEB transfer from a contracted service account to a benefits account, which is basically where it's going to be booked. So it's just a transfer from a different funding or different kind of expense account. We had some initiatives this year in the communications area, building the website and other graphic design areas where we ended up having to add budgets for. The middle school, we had some non-labor expenses that we decided to add for their initiatives that are going on at the middle school. And again, as you can see, we added the literacy incentive expenses, which pretty much offsets the aid that we put on the revenue source. Therefore, the total expenses comes up to a little over close to $402,000. Therefore, the bottom line to our general fund unreserved account would be a little over $110,000 increase. So we're pretty much right on to where we're at or thought we were going to be at the beginning of the year. We also had a few spend down of reserves. We have a reserve out there, assigned fund balance for our ATPPS program, and we are going to be spending that down by a little over $100,000. The staff development assigned fund balance, we're going to be spending that down, and basically what this is it's staff development money that didn't get spent in the prior year, which we put to assigned fund balance. And we're dispersing those budgets to spend that down to the different buildings. It's a discretionary staff development. So with that, that's all I have for you, unless there's any questions, and this will be for the board for approval.
Any questions? Looks like none. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that will be on our action agenda for approval in a little bit. Next item on our Superintendent Metz.
And board members, in your packet is the WEMEP resolution, which I am recommending we approve tonight. Just a review of what this entails, and then we can certainly discuss it in more detail. There are 11 member districts of WEMEP. I'm going to read from a summary statement that was produced by WEMEP on this topic. WEMEP's Joint Powers Board has been actively engaged in discussions about the future administration of the FAIR schools. The WEMEP board has decided that they would like to focus their collaboration on strengthening equity work, professional development, and student programming for the region. They feel that the day-to-day school operations would be best managed by member districts. One of the options being considered is that the Minneapolis and Robbinsdale school districts operate Fair Downtown and Fair Crystal respectively. Minneapolis and Robbinsdale have actively participated in these discussions, along with all WEMEP member district superintendents. The WEMEP board will vote on their decision on February 11th, 2 days from today. Quick reminder that if this does occur, that the Crystal School, the Crystal Fair School, will be operated by Robbinsdale and the downtown school by Minneapolis. Both districts have committed to keeping the schools pretty much as is for the next 4 to 5 years. It's hard to guarantee that they will not change at all because every school changes over time. But there's a good solid guarantee from Minneapolis and Robbinsdale that the schools would continue pretty much as is for the next 4 to 5 years. Students from St. Louis Park would still be able to attend the schools, and they would be able to attend from all WEMEP districts. District by district, our member WEMEP districts are approving this resolution, and I'm recommending that we approve it tonight and send it on to the Joint Powers Board. After the Joint Powers Board votes, however, it still would need to go to the legislature making the final decision on this. And Julie, you may want to add more.
The only thing I would add, there have been more discussions since we last talked about it with Robbinsdale and Minneapolis. I attended a parent meeting last week where both superintendents, well, 3 superintendents, WEMEP, Robbinsdale, and Minneapolis, along with senior administrators from both districts, were there to talk with parents and answer their questions. And while we'd had one meeting a month, 6 weeks ago, where there were a number of parents that were saying, "Why are you doing this?" At this last meeting, I think parents, it appeared that questions were answered, and it was much more of a how, why, how are you going to do this kind of discussion, and very honest and detailed answers to the extent they could from Robbinsdale and Minneapolis. So as Rob said, the board will be voting on it on Wednesday, although with a caveat, because we are technically closing the school, although the same students will come back next fall. There's nothing that will visibly change because WEMEP won't be operating it. The legal advice has been that we have to treat it as a closing, even though nothing is ending. And so we'll have to have a public hearing or two and then have a vote again after that. So that's what's going on. Any questions? Okay. Last item on the agenda, on the discussion agenda rather, is the strategic plan kickoff. And for that discussion, we're going to have both Superintendent Metz and Sarah Thompson, who's our Director of Communications and Community Relations.
Good evening, board members. Reminder that we have been operating under a 5-year strategic plan that has run its course from 2009 to 2014, and we've been working this year to get up and running on our next 5-year strategic plan. And you know that I'm really excited about it because I see it as a great opportunity for our district. So the new plan will run from years 2015 to 2020. Sarah Thompson, who's standing beside me, I want to recognize. I'm kind of stretching time here while she gets the technology to work. But she's done a terrific job working with our facilitating group and with me to get all the nuts and bolts in order and get all the prep work done so that this plan is ready to roll. The mission and beliefs of our current plan are going to remain. So important thing to remember is we're going to take stock on what we accomplished over the last 5 years, which has been a great deal, and do a needs assessment of what we yet have to finish, and then bring a group together to plot out the next 5 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Superintendent Metz. He's going to try his magic with my computer and see if we can get this new fancy video to play. What we did was update the mission video for the district. The one we had was about 5 years old, and not surprisingly, we had turned over several staff members in that time frame, so decided we needed a new, fresh look to our mission statement video. So we'll see if we can get that to play tonight, and if we can't, you'll see it on the website tomorrow. So a little something to look forward to if we can't get it to play. Couple things I wanted to bring up tonight as we kick off the strategic plan. We are only a few short weeks away from our first big event. On February 24th, we will be having a World Cafe. What that means is it's not just one evening meeting where people can come and give their input. We will have 3 different sessions throughout the day. So whatever works in your schedule, you're welcome to join us. We're interested in what you think. Where would you like to see the school district go in the next 5 years? What would you like to hear from our curriculum department? What would our students need to do to be prepared for the next course in their life? So 3 sessions. One will be at 7:30 a.m. for the early risers. We'll have one session at 4 p.m. for those who can get out of work a little early or who have some time in the afternoon. And then we'll have the traditional evening session from 7 to 9. All sessions will be in the high school, in the old gymnasium. Easy parking, easy in and out. Hopefully it'll be really convenient. Lots of room. We hope as many people as possible can attend. We're really looking for a lot of input from a broad scope of the community. We will be asking you some questions that day, asking you to dig deep and think hard about what the future of the school district should be. I'm going to read the questions to you right now. Some people need to have some time to think about it, process it, want to bring their ideas to the table. So I'm going to just read them to you quickly in case you want to give it some thought in advance of the World Cafe. What do you think is most valuable about our schools? What do you value the most? What are the qualities and skills you'd like to see in our graduates? How can the St. Louis Park community help us make sure that all students succeed? And finally, what do you believe will be our greatest challenges in the coming 5 years? Certainly these are very broad questions, but they're meant to really kind of drive to the core of what do we need to do moving forward? What needs to be our objectives? What needs to be looked at in terms of actions so that as we move forward, we can figure out the best direction for the strategic plan? So we recognize that Tuesday, February 24th, may not be the best day for everyone. It might be that you're out of town for work, you're booked in meetings, there's a really good game on TV that you need to watch. Lots of things can happen on the 24th. That's okay. We will also have an online SurveyMonkey. So if you can't attend, you can still offer your input. So there will be lots of options there for that. So with that in mind,
I almost have it.
he almost has it, so I'll just keep talking.
Give it 30 more seconds.
Yeah, I'll just keep talking.
Is that, I took a quick look, it's not on the website yet, but will it be?
The strategic plan cafe.
The cafe,
Yep,
the
World Cafe.
times, the
It's up on the
questions.
website now.
Oh, it
Yep,
is,
and the
okay.
flyer's on the website. Yep, was posted today. There's a whole new section on the website on the left-hand column that's going to be all about strategic planning. So as we go through the process, all of the documents, all of the advertising will also be there. And we'll do our best to share it in the Sun Sailor, all kinds of places across the community. So while Rob he's getting really close on the video. It's actually playing on my laptop now. Now we just have to get it on the screen. Some other things that are important as we go through this process, we will once again have a core team. And this is a group of people, around about 30 people. I'm going to pause because we actually can see the video. Now if we can just get sound. Let's do it the old-fashioned way.
Can you bring it back to the beginning?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
mission video. Yay. So thank you, Mr. Betts. We got that to work. Teamwork. It's all about teamwork. So we will use the new mission video to kind of kick off all of our sessions as we go through the process. So the World Cafe, quarantine meetings, anything related to the strategic plan, because we have said that for the most part, we're likely going to keep our mission intact. We may do a few little minor edits, but for the most part, we're going to keep it intact because we think it's really pretty true to the core of what we're looking to move forward in our district. So we thought it was important to really show the community who we were, what we're about, many of our students in action in the school day. So that's the new mission video. So that's exciting. Core team. I want to talk just a little bit about core team. As I started to say, core team is made up of, give or take, 30 people. And this is made up of administrators, school board members, staff, parents, community members, across the board. Even a couple students will be on the core team. And this is really the group of people who sets the plan in motion. They determine what should be our objectives. How are we going to measure those objectives? They really get into the nitty-gritty of it. I've heard some people say, who participated last time, that these can be grueling meetings. These can be really long days. I've heard lots of adjectives described for these meetings, but they're also really, really, really life-changing is also what I've heard. Energizing, and they really do set the course for the district, so they're ultimately paramount to each and everything we do in the district. So they'll be coming up. We've got 2 in April, 1 in May, and 1 in June. And then out of the core team will come the actions. So what really do we plan to set in motion for the next 5 years? And so we'll have action teams around each of those actions, and those teams will also meet 5 times between April and June. And so what we hope to do is come back to you on June 22nd. It seems really far away right now as we talk about snow for tomorrow. But June 22nd, we plan to come back to you with a revised strategic plan, something we think is how we should move forward. And so when we get to that point, you'll know that a lot of input has come into the district. We've mulled over a lot of initiatives. Everything you've heard tonight, as well as other things like the tech plan, Schoology, literacy plans, equity, all of those plans will come together under one strategic plan umbrella. And we'll give you a roadmap for how we're going to achieve our goals in the next 5 years. So that's something to look forward to. You will be happy to know you'll see me and Mr. Metz regularly. We'll probably be here at least once a month, if not more often, kind of updating everyone on the process and what the next steps are. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Sounds good. Questions? I think
right.
this is an exciting opportunity, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to our action agenda, and the first item on the action agenda is approval of, it says 2015-16, but these are fiscal 2015 budget amendments, correct? So it's recommended that the school board approve the 2015 budget amendments as presented. Is there a motion? Motion by Jim, second by Bruce. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Second item is approval of the REMAP resolution. It's recommended that the St. Louis Park School Board approve the resolution recommending to the Joint Powers Board of WEMAP that WEMAP cease to operate the fair schools and work to transfer ownership of the building in Crystal to Robbinsdale area schools and the building in Minneapolis to the Minneapolis Public Schools for those districts to operate the schools as inter-district integration magnet schools as presented. Would anybody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Joe, second by anyone? Second by Karen. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries 6-0 as well. Communications and transmittals. Anything anybody would like to communicate or transmit? Karen.
So I'd like to talk about Children First assets, and this weekend, Asset 18 was on display. That's youth involved in programs. Our middle school math team had an excellent showing at the competition sponsored by the Minnesota Organization of Professional Engineers. Our team placed fourth, and the kids on that team were Sydney Hosfeld from 8th grade, Mitchell Von Eschen from 7th grade, Josh Kruger in 6th grade, and Thor Anderson in 6th grade. We also had a number of kids who participated in the individual component of that competition. Greta Long from 8th grade, Chris Annenson from 8th grade, Patrick Jur from 7th grade, Maddie Lynn from 7th grade, Ben Cantor from 6th grade, and Leah Richardson from 6th grade. All totaled, there were 72 students from 10 different schools who participated, and I was there. Those math problems are really hard, and the individual competition, you got to answer fast. And the kid who won sometimes had the answer before the question was fully read. So I'm really proud of our coach, Michelle Stark, at the middle school, and all the kids who participated in this math meet. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a little one. Last weekend we had, or which was the second, I believe. Jim, remember? But we had the Aquila pancake breakfast, and it was well attended, very, very populated there. And I'm sorry if I didn't get out of the kitchen to greet many people, but we were busy. Thing that we did do was measure our waste and our recyclable. So we were able to recycle 94 pounds in recycled compostable material, and 5 pounds of trash went to the waste. So it was a great day, and I threw down the gauntlet to Peter Hobart, of which their last event did 413 pounds of recycle. Is that correct, Karen? And 25 pounds of trash. So number-wise, I think you're beat us with 94%.
Yeah, but we were serving more food, and we had those hay bales for the pictures at the family fun night, so there was just more stuff and more kinds of food.
Just saying. Yeah, well, you know,
A friendly
percentage-wise, we Aquila did very well and is in the front with 96%. However, there's other representatives here on the board of other elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, of which do have events. And the gauntlet is thrown to you to measure your recycle, compostable, non-trash versus trash. So I can talk more trash.
And just remind everybody, Lori Kraft is a parent at Peter Hobart. She's a Hennepin County master recycler. She's willing to help any school in our district to really pay attention to how we do planning and throw away stuff that when we're done with it.
All right, I think the gauntlet has been thrown. Joe? Do you-
I'll follow the trash talk, but it's something different, I suppose. So a few of us, including the superintendent, some of the staff, and a couple of board members were at the State of the City address last Thursday. And it was a great event, as always. This one was a little different in that our mayor, Jeff Jacobs, announced that he was not going to run for re-election this fall. So he's been our mayor for the past 16 years, I believe, and then he was on the city council for 8 years previous to that. And I just want to say, as you know, coming from the school perspective, that he has been very supportive of the schools, and I know that his family is very supportive of the schools as well. When he trumpets the city, and he's the greatest cheerleader for the city you can imagine, along with John Basil, but he's just a great ambassador, but he always mentions the schools and the strength of the schools, along with his talk about the city. So we will miss him as the mayor.
And for many years, I think he still has, he's visited our middle school students when they, in their social studies class, when they were talking about their community to learn about St. Louis Park. So that's been a direct contribution back.
And I'll just add on, I mean, he's done the Peter Hobart Family Fun every year, serving popcorn, done teacher appreciation, welcome week, numerous times. I would echo Joe's words, thank him for his service and what he's done for the city and the schools.
And I'll add on, he also attended the Aquila Read Nights for a number of years when I was on PTO board. And he's been a great icon for the city.
Any other communications and transmittals? I just wanted to point out that the city has put out a nice brochure on what's good about St. Louis Park that they distributed at that event last week, and I thought it was very useful if you pick up one of these around town. We all have a delightful handwritten note, handwritten letter at our desk about the PSI Drama Club doing productions on Friday, February 20th and 21st of La Araña Anansi. My Spanish pronunciation is lousy, but I can read it, Anansi the Spider. So that's something to attend. And thank you, Emily Lewis, for the letter I got. Are all of ours from Emily, or are they other students? Okay, we each have one from different students. So thank you to all of the students who wrote to tell us about that event. Shortly after that, we're on the 25th. The World Cafe is Tuesday the 24th. On Wednesday the 25th, we'll hold the first of our 2 listening sessions, and that's going to be at 6:30 to 8, but if nobody comes in the first half hour, we won't be staying. But 6:30 to 8 at Peter Hobart Media Center. We'll have one more board meeting before then to announce that, but I wanted to say that today, and it'll be up on the board, or up on the website. And let me see. I think that was it. All right. So with that, I would see if anybody wants to make a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ken. Second by Joe. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.